I grew up in two radically different cities that were merely miles apart. The first, the one I was born in, was a little grittier. The socioeconomic status was heterogeneous. Homes were big or small, or sometimes not at all. It was a place where you gained street smarts and learned about hustles, the place I live now. At the age of 13, years after my father's death, my mom remarried and we moved to another city, a city much more homogenous and part of the socioeconomic upper class. My new friends knew nothing of the streets, but were schooled in business, real estate, leverage, and the stock market. They believed they would grow up to own businesses because their parents owned businesses. The question wasn't if they would succeed, but when. Those two cities, of course, were more than just two cities. They were two separate worlds. Two worlds not solely separated by socioeconomic status nor racial makeup, but, according to my guest today, whose boundaries are steeped in basic access to financial literacy. John Hope Bryant is the founder, chairman, and chief executive officer of Operation Hope, the largest not-for-profit provider of financial literacy, financial inclusion, and economic empowerment tools in the United States. He has served as an advisor to 3 sitting U.S. presidents representing both parties. His latest initiative is encapsulated in his new best-selling book, Financial Literacy for All: Disrupting Struggle, Advancing Financial Freedom, and Building a New American Middle Class. John Hope Bryant, welcome to Earn and Invest. I want to start with your name, your middle name to be exact. You weren't born with it, were you?
No, yeah, but no different than Stevie Wonder is really Stevland Morris. And Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is really Michael King. At some point in their life, either they got inspired or somebody, in the case of Martin King, it was his father got inspired. In fact, his father was so inspired, he changed his name and his son's name. They were both Michael King and changed it to Martin Luther King, as in biblical. In my case, it was not as spiritual or as enlightened. I used to travel internationally at an early age, and I had founded Operation Hope. And people like Reverend Jesse Jackson and other leaders would call me Dr. Hope, Mr. Hope. And that's the Hope guy. And I get a plane ticket to go to give a speech in Uganda or something. And I had to be there in 2 days. And I'd go to the airport and the plane ticket said John Hope Bryant. And I couldn't get on the plane because my name was John Bryant. Or somebody would send me a check, and it would be John Hope Bryant. And then I think the capper was, I don't think I've ever told the story actually. The real capper was, I wanted to do a blog back in the days, 2000 and the early 2000s and late 1900s. You want to do a blog. That was a big thing back then. I wanted a website, and John Bryant was taken, but John Hope Bryant was not. So that was that became the checking of the box. And so my name was legally changed to John Hope Bryant. I don't remember what year, but it was early in my career as a public figure. And it's sort of taken, it is also unconsciously inspires you to not be a jerk. Your middle name can't be Hope if you're a jerk. So it just works.
This idea of hope fits your brand, obviously, Operation Hope, etc. It's inspirational, but when I look back at the stories you tell of your childhood in the book Financial Literacy for All, there wasn't always the most reason to have hope. For instance, there was a man who was pretty important to you, a mentor, OC, a guy who literally saved your life at one point. You saw his relationship to money, and in this case, it wasn't really inspiring. What happened?
Well, he saved my life. My mom and dad had divorced over money when I was 4 or 5. Number one cause for divorce in America, as you know, is money. And mom decided she was going to go and save money by living with one of her girlfriends. She told me it was a cousin. She told me it was an auntie, I think she said. What Black families do this, everybody's a relative. And she was just her girlfriend. And the girlfriend had a boyfriend. Her name was OC. whose house this was. And they let us stay with him so we could save money. And versus OC saying, hey, I can't afford to take care of my family and your family. So can we have a conversation about the money? And maybe you guys can contribute a little money into the kitty so that, I don't go broke and I'm not stressed out. He didn't have that conversation. Ambassador Andrew Young often says that men and women fail for three reasons: arrogance, pride, and greed. Most people are not, in my experience, aren't greedy, but they're over-indexed in pride. And OC over-indexed in pride. So he wouldn't have this conversation. He worked a regular job, but then he was like, well, how do I make some quick money to augment these expenses? And unfortunately for him and for me, the guy who saved my life when I was falling on his porch, playing on his porch, falling backwards and hitting my head and swallowing my tongue, and he cleared my throat passage from the back. Thus, he was my hero. Unfortunately for me, this guy went around the corner and found a quick way to make money selling what I think was marijuana, but it was some kind of unprescribed substance. And at some point, he became pretty good at it pretty quickly. And the real drug dealers around the corner didn't take too nicely to the competition. So I was waiting on the porch for him to come home because he was my hero. He saved my life. And I think my mother was still at work at McDonnell Douglas Aircraft when this happened. And as he's riding his bicycle back home from selling what he was selling, I saw a truck come up behind him, and the truck seemed to wait intentionally until he was in front of the house for maximum effect and maximum message sending power. Got in front of the house where he lived. So they had already scoped him out, checked him out, followed him, I'm sure. And they got in front of the house and they ran him down. They ran him down with a truck and drug him down the street until he was dead. And I can still see that as I'm telling you that story. I mean, I've now said it enough times so I don't cry. And I've been able to catch myself emotionally and prepare myself, which is why I tell the story slowly. But if I ever run up on that story quickly, it still gets me emotional because he gave his life. I mean, he gave his life. In some ways he did, and accidentally gave his life for us, but intentionally he saved my life. And the fact that I can't say thank you to him. There's a couple people who I feel sorry that I did not track. OC, I don't know his last name. George, my best friend, which was murdered right after that when I was in Compton. Don't know his last name. And the banker who came in my classroom from Bank of America. I never got his card. I saw his card. Maybe he gave it to me, but I didn't retain it, but I don't remember his name. I just knew he was a banker from Bank of America. We are a partner with Bank of America today, by the way, one of my entities, Operation Hope. But those three names are names that I'd like to show appreciation for, and I just can't because it was a moment, and you don't really value the moment. As I keep telling people, history does not feel historic when you're sitting in it.
Yeah.
It just feels like another day.
Yep.
But it does not mean the moment is not, in fact, historic. And I can tell you from experience that there's these moments that happen to you, and you need to pay attention and slow it down and be present, because you'll look back at that and you'll want all the details and all the texture for later reference.
I want to talk about that banker in a moment, but first I want to go to one other heartbreaking occurrence, maybe one of those other moments you were just talking about where you need to slow down. And that was maybe some poor financial modeling, poor financial behavior that you learned from your father, right? So your brother, the trajectory of your brother's life was changed by a financial decision your father made. What did he do?
So my brother, Donnie, Dave Jarnell Harris, call him Donnie, oldest in our family, wanted to go to college. And we wanted him to go to college. He would be the first person, I had never thought about that to this moment. Wow. he'd be the first person going to college. And in our family, I really hadn't thought about this. Like, it did not hit me until this very moment. Wow. He was going to college. He would be the first person with a college degree. And my mother was saving the money for him to go to a college of his choice. And she'd saved $4,000. And my father was paying too much attention to the wrong things. And I guess knew exactly where she put the money. It was cash. She should have put it in a bank account under her name, financial literacy. But she, I'm sure, just put it in a can or something. And he took the money, thought he had a better use for it. I'm sure he wasted it on whatever idea he had, lost it. It was gone in a flash, even though she saved that cash well over time. And more importantly than the cash, it robbed my brother of decision-making, of choice. All I say, I keep saying money is freedom. Money is nothing more than freedom. And my mother had bought my brother's freedom of self-determination to go to a college of his choice, to pursue a career of his choice. And then my father robbed, from my mother's perspective, robbed my brother of that choice. And so at 18 years of age, he had to then pivot at that moment and go into the military if he wanted to have a 4-year college education. Well, now the military are experts in behavior analytics. And so they know when they got you in there, there's going to be a very high probability, if they give you an incentive after you do your 4 years and all that stuff, give some cash, whatever, to keep, oh, you got this degree now, we'll make you an officer. So they kept him there for 30 years. Now, I used to want to be in the military because my brother was in it. I wanted to go to the Navy too, until I realized how little they got paid and how hard they worked. I actually stayed in a bunk bed on a warship in Long Beach where he was stationed. I remember what it looked like and what it smelled like. It was stark. It was minimalist. It was very romantic until, again, I realized how much he got paid or didn't get paid, and then the romance went right out the window. I wanted a uniform until they told me what the pay was. But that experience was crystallizing to me. And my brother, what would my brother be today? I mean, he went through the military, retired from the military, beautiful naval uniform, an officer's uniform, great. Married Hawaiian, had Hawaiian kids, lives in Hawaii to this day, is a contractor for the military in Hawaii. But his whole life, one could argue, was predetermined by that $4,000 experience with my father. What would have happened if he had simply been able to go to a college of his choice to pursue a major of his liking? Who would he be today? What would he be doing and where? I mean, his whole life would have been different, I think.
And what we're really talking about, in a sense, is that tale of two cities that I mentioned in the introduction. We're not really talking about two cities. What we're talking about is two financial mindsets.
Yeah.
And you grew up with one financial mindset, and there was a turning point where, in a sense, I feel like you switched to the other mindset. And that's when this banker came to your class. Why do you think he wasn't just some other white guy in a suit coming to your school, but had such an impact on you?
Well, if I want to be philosophical, I'd say it's God. If I want to be spiritual, I think we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience, and energy matters. And I think the universe doesn't make mistakes like that. I think that I needed to get this message because I was a bridge to a larger messenger and messaging. But in that moment, I didn't like him and he didn't like us. Uh, white men in suits did not have a very good rep in my neighborhood in that day. If you were a white man in a suit, you're a detective for the police, and it was not a good suit. It was a polyester job with a big wide tie, sorry, traditional tie, and it was nothing to be proud of, or it wasn't sexy. The car you drove in was raggedy and rattled, and didn't, and you were not a nice person. You slammed my friends against patrol cars. Hit this guy had on a beautiful blue suit with a Italian stitching and a white Egyptian cotton shirt, bleach white, red tie, and 6'2" years old, 6'2", 6'2" tall, about 60 years old is my guess. Really sharp guy, and I was like meeting a Martian. And he was very, it wasn't rude, but it was clear that he didn't want to be there. And he was only there because the Community Reinvestment Act either was in place at that point or had just been threatened to be in place. And so B of A, Bank of America said, look, go, we got this community reinvestment responsibility or something. Just go teach financial literacy in the local school. And he worked in Long Beach, and Compton was the next neighboring hard up city. So he came to Compton, and we were like, he came in once a week for 45 minutes. So the first week we weren't having it. We just ignored him. And he ignored us. He just sort of, stood there. And then the second week came in, he said, you kids aren't so bad. You remind me of my own kids. And he sort of broke the ice. And I'm like, well, you're not so bad for a white dude. And so now we're teasing each other and testing each other and talking to each other, starting to build a relationship, a rapport. And then the third week he came in, there was comfort, and he started talking to us about the magic of markets and money and compound interest and all that stuff. And at least my eyes were wide open. I think my eyes were more wide open than my fellow students because of what I had gone through. So I was real focused on how do I get out the hood and legally and alive. And not just that, how do I succeed at scale? Because I see all this talent and gifts around me, but I've had my best friend murdered with my next door neighbor who's a drug dealer. I've had the guy who saved my life murdered. I had the net worth of my family go poof, even after they were really smart and bought all this stuff, gas stations and apartment buildings, all homes. But something caused their stuff to just explode. And it wasn't the Ku Klux Klan. It wasn't some racist white man sitting in our living room. It was our own decision-making or lack thereof. Because I didn't see anybody else engaging in our family. It was our family that did not know what to engage in and what decision to make. So I was really curious, man. I was really focused on what do I do? How do I get the heck out of this situation? This banker was my gateway. And I asked him the question, I think it was the fourth week. What do you do for a living? And how did you get rich legally? And no matter how many times I say that, it still tickles me. Because I was dead serious when I said it. I wasn't joking. You're like a Martian, man. Like, where'd the business card come from? What do you mean 16th floor? There's no 16th floor in Compton. It's the 6th floor. That's the courthouse. How are you here in the middle of the day? Everybody I know has an hourly job. You're on a salary? What's that? You have a white shirt. It's never dirty. How do you do that? My dad had a blue shirt. It was always dirty. There's a beautiful car in the parking lot. It's not stolen. It has a plate on it with tags. The tags are current. The car has been washed. Who washed it? Who are you? Where do you live? Because you certainly don't live around here. And you look like a detective, but you also look rich. You got this suit on. What do you do? He said, I'm a banker and I finance entrepreneurs. Man, you get it. That was it. I'm okay. Okay. I don't know what an entrepreneur is. I've never heard the word my entire life. French word, build something from nothing. But whatever it is, if it's legal and you're financing it, I'm going to be one. And of course, that's who I am today. But then again, these things you figure out over time. It took me, Jordan, forever to look back and think, well, hell, Operation Hope is a second. That was the first question I asked was, what do you do? And he said, finance entrepreneurs, that's who I am. The largest financial inclusion holding company in America today. But then the what I do part, the passionate part of Operation Hope, teaching, coaching, training, accessing. Well, that was a second question that was not as sexy, but is probably more interesting. I said, are there more bankers like you? And he said, oh, yeah, there's got to be. There's 10,000 banks in America, and a few of those banks have 100,000 employees. It's got to be close to 1 million people who are bankers. And I said, excuse me? And he repeated it. And I said, no, wait a minute. Slow this down. Your job is to loan poor people money. Yes. It's your job. Yes. All I got to do is prove to you that I can pay it back and I have a decent plan. Yes. And I'm credit worthy. Yes. And if I don't pay it back by some strike of misfortune, I don't get dead. And he says, no, why would you? No, that's violent. No, we issue a notice of default. We impact your credit. Like, what does impact your credit mean? I mean, this is like, I'm like, look, okay, I'm in. And so I looked around my neighborhood. I'm like, oh man, not only am I going to clean everybody's clock on this business selling candy and competing with a liquor store who was in the candy business who wouldn't listen to me. I tried a joint venture. I went to told that 10 years old, told the owner of the liquor store he needed a joint venture with me. I didn't use the word joint venture, the phrase. I realized in hindsight, that's what I meant. Either partner with me to sell this candy or I'm gonna put you out of business. And I end up putting him out of the candy business by selling candy myself out of my den. But what I realized today is that I'm teaching an entire generation of how money-free enterprise and capitalism works based on that answer that the banker gave me of there's all these bankers, they want to lend money to people who are poor, who want to become wealthy, but you need to understand the rules of the game and so you can access the capital. And that's what we're doing, $4.5 billion in capital deployed since. All that goes back to that 9-year-old experience in the classroom. That's why I'm so tore up that I can't remember who that banker was. I owe so much to him. We got along famously. By the time he left, I was wearing a suit just like him. It just it wasn't a very nice suit. It wasn't pretty like his. Mine was crushed velvet it was like purple red, like a fuchsia red purple crushed velvet velour 3-piece job with a big bow tie and a ruffled shirt. Because that was the suit my mother made me to go to church on Sunday. And I was like, I want to wear a suit like the banker. And she's like, well, I'm not buying you a suit. I don't have money for that. But you can wear the Sunday one. Okay. I had my little briefcase, I had my dreams in it.
We are talking to John Hope Bryant. He is the founder and chairman and chief executive officer of Operation Hope. And we are talking about the new American middle class, the new American dream. We're going to take a short break. I'm Doc G, and this is the Earn and Invest podcast. Any questions before I read us back in? This is wonderful. So you got to tell me if you need to like go, because I could probably talk to you like this forever. So I apologize. But I'll try to keep a reasonable amount of time on the rest. But I do want to talk about the book for sure.
5:25. I'm good till 5:25.
All right, we're good then. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back. We are talking to John Hope Bryant. His book is Financial Literacy for All, Disrupting Struggle, Advancing Financial Freedom, and Building a New American Middle Class. John, you say at every critical juncture of America's history, our people have mobilized in some meaningful way to help cure bad thinking that was taking us on the path to nowhere. What is today's bad thinking?
That DE&I is stupid is one example. We have let our fears and our insecurities and our traumas and our dramas and our short-term thinking to ruin our business. I'm sorry, to threaten, it hasn't ruined anything yet, to threaten the magic of America. You know, this country is she's not a country, she's an idea. And we can make her anything we want. And we can also remake her into something we don't want. It's a very delicate thing, this thing called freedom and democracy. You know, you got to keep reclaiming it every day. And nobody washes rental cars, Jordan. You know, you got to reclaim this freedom thing every day. And you can't subcontract it or delegate it. And that's why I said we're living in a moment in history, but history does not feel historic when you're sitting in it. And I look at folks who are saying that, you know, and the phrase DE&I is dead. I mean, it's been so politicized and trauma adjusted that it is toxic as you guys spend so much time trying to defend the phrase, you might as well just do away with it and create something else. But diversity, equity, and inclusion literally just means GDP for the future. It just literally means R&D for an emerging market, research and development for an emerging market of our future economy. You know, if you were in the 1900s in this country, early 1900s, DE&I would have been for Jewish people, Polish people, Italian people, maybe German people. I mean, but you know, up and coming Europeans who are trying to escape hardship and to come to America for a better life. That would have been diversity, equity, and inclusion back then. In the 70s, it was women. The 1970s. In 1972, I'm gonna be dramatic when I say this. A white woman, a middle-class, suburban, well-educated white woman, could not get a bank account, could not get a credit card, could not get a loan unless her husband co-signed it. And I hope your people listening to your podcast don't swerve off the road when I'm saying this. It's so shocking. You may have to pull off and replay this and listen to it again. This is not 1872. It was 1972. And don't trust me. If you're listening to this, ask your mother, ask your father. You might be your mother, your father listening right now. Mommy will shake her head. And it was because of Black people, oddly enough, that white women got free, because Dr. King got assassinated in 1968. President Johnson, who was responsible for 4 civil rights bills, sort of threw his hands up because the Vietnam War. He was exhausted. He said, I'm not going to rerun. I'm not going to run. I forget who the folks were campaigning, but Nixon ultimately became president and was doing a little bit of he was race baiting a little bit in his language, and to prove once he became president he was not the bad guy that people said he was on race, he went counterintuitive and did something called affirmative action. That was a Republican president, created affirmative action. But certain people really didn't want to get with this thing of taking Blacks and moving them from the streets into the boardrooms or wherever affirmative action was going to place you. So it sort of stalled. And here comes women in early 70s who had this problem of not being included. And that affirmative action plus the 1974 law brought them into the economy. And what's today the effect of this policy approach? Well, first of all, men don't have their heads cut off today, because that would have lasted women would have been like, wait till the man gets home and tell a woman she can't have self-determination. That wouldn't last very long. But on a serious note, from a financial literacy perspective, women are $6 to $7 trillion of the annual economy every year today. 25% of the GDP of this country are women. What would have happened, Jordan, if we had not included women? We'd be a third-rate nation, and we would not be the superpower of the world, because you never had a superpower that wasn't the economic power at the same time. So I think that where we are today is a similar conversation. It's just dealing with Black and brown people, which makes some people uncomfortable. But demographics are destiny, and whether people are uncomfortable or not, this world is changing. And I've joked, I've said a couple of times, like, there's not enough college-educated, successful white men to drive GDP for the next 30 years. It's not even a racial comment. It's just math. And so we need to expand the table and add a chair, and you need to train all these people to get in the economy and drive it. I'm saying this, that I think it's sort of tongue in cheek, but somebody's going to be shocked by it. If a Black person succeeds today learning how to fish, even the racist wins, because all boats rise when the economy grows. And so we're going to have to get to a point here where we decide that we're better together. That's what I believe. I believe we're better together. That's why I think the financial literacy is a great leveler, is a civil rights issue of this generation. I think we got 40% of this country today is Black and brown. 1952, 53, America was 90% white, Jordan, 90% white. Now in 10 years, we'll be a majority Black and brown. These folks are not prepared to come and lead the economy. At the same time, you have a majority of people over the age of 65 that's white, wealthy baby boomers trying to retire. Now, there's not a thing I just said that's racial. It's just the economic facts. And so we got to train people to take their place in the economy. So I just think it's stupid, it's backwards for us to cancel the very thing that needs to be nurtured to make sure that we all are prosperous and we aren't speaking Mandarin in 20 years because somebody else has taken our place as the economic and global leader in the world. It's a long answer to your question, but it was a very good question. And so I think that all these things sort of blend in together. We need inclusive capitalism. We need inclusive growth. We need opportunity for all. We need financial literacy as the grease that oils the gears of the economic model. We need to figure out whether we're better together.
I want to tie you down on a point here because I was jumping out of my seat as you were talking about the civil rights movement led to financial literacy in white women, right? I mean, pretty much that was what you're just talking about. On the other hand, one of my questions here, literally one of my questions here I was going to ask you is, did the civil rights movement fall short when it came to financial literacy for Black Americans?
Sure
And so
it
it's yeah, I mean, it's ironic, right? I mean, it's ironic that actually the civil rights movement propelled white women forward to where the financial literacy has now really picked up in a sense that there's a lot more financial literacy than there was.
Well, a little tongue in cheek, but I guess I'm also serious. You know, every good comedian, he or she can make you laugh, but he's making you laugh about something that otherwise it make you cry. You wouldn't otherwise talk about it. The white man didn't have to go home with Dr. King. The white man didn't have to go home with Andrew Young or John Lewis. The white man could ignore civil rights leaders and close their front door. They had to go home with their wife. They had to talk to their daughter. They had to talk to their mama. I said mama on purpose. Mama, not mother. They had to talk to, without women, there'd be a lot less men. So this was a forced conversation so if anybody's going to get through the gates, it was going to be initially white women. I think God has a sense of humor, and I think that Dr. King he was assassinated as he pivoted. Dr. King said, he didn't say, I'm here to save Black people. He said, I'm here to redeem the soul of America from the triple evils of war, racism, and poverty. And he had done great work in racism and pivoted toward a war, even though he was roundly criticized for his criticism of the Vietnam War. He was right. And by the way, without the Vietnam War, Johnson probably would have just been heralded as one of the best presidents of the 20th century, but that's a whole nother story. And if Kennedy wasn't assassinated, maybe we would not have ended up in the Vietnam War. This is a podcast about financial literacy. Let me stay focused. But I think I love historical narratives because it's just so, what if this and what if that, so on and so forth. But the pivot from Dr. King to money, he's a pastor. He's a man of the cloth. Martin Luther. So he was about redistribution of wealth. It's very natural for a pastor to say those who have the most should give to those who have the least. But if you're telling the top 3% that I'm going to just redistribute your money, and you're a Nobel Peace Prize winner known for mobilizing millions of people, now you want to mobilize poor whites, poor Blacks, Latinos, Asians, Indians, everybody to come to Washington and not going to leave until you get your check, you don't make it to Washington. And he didn't make it to Washington. Now you think about this, Jordan. This guy survived 13 years. I'm sorry, 15. No. 13 years in this extraordinarily volatile movement for civil rights, but didn't make it to his first march, what I call civil rights, because those who at the top said, oh, no. Now you're talking about my money? Oh, you're not redistributing my wealth? You won't make it to Washington. And they got him in Memphis because he knew if he got to Washington, he wouldn't leave. And he was extraordinarily charismatic. And so I think really money got him killed. I think that he realized, as you listen to, when you talked about the March on Washington, it was a march for jobs and freedom. It wasn't freedom and jobs. It was jobs and freedom. And he said, remember, Jordan, it's financial literacy. We're here to pick up a check, to cash a check marked non-sufficient funds. By the way, if you want to be fascinated, listen to Jay-Z's 444 album. It's all about financial literacy. There's a lot of stuff that sort of seeps into the culture about money that's been going on for, yes, recently, but also goes back to the beginning of time. And Jesus Christ only got upset when he turned over the tables of the money changers in the temple. So it's been here all the time, and just we sort of not paid attention to it. And Dr. King, I think if he had to do it over again, he would have focused on desegregation of underserved neighborhoods more so than integration, versus having a black man sitting next to a white man at a white lunch counter. He would have tried to create an economy and a level playing field in our own community. And Andrew Young, who was with him on that balcony when he was assassinated, said to live in a system of free enterprise and not to understand the rules of free enterprise must be the very definition of slavery. So, the last thing I'll say to you, and I don't think I've said this on an interview yet, there was a meeting between Dr. King and Andrew Young and Harry Belafonte 2 weeks before he was assassinated in New York City. And Dr. King said, Andy, we got to stop this thing where we're marching to try to get a street light up. It's ridiculous. We need to do two things to the next phase of this movement. We need to get our folks in politics, so they're mayors and the city council people, so they can just put up a street light. Why are we marching for a street light? Number two, we got to get into this money. We need jobs and opportunity. We need to get into the economic side. And then he was assassinated. If you look at what Andrew Young did, he followed Dr. King's advice precisely, becoming mayor of Atlanta, congressman in the South, the UN ambassador, brought the Olympics here, turned the city into the only international city in the South, busiest airport in the world, blah, 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 $450 billion a year economy, a city of Atlanta. This is the fulfillment of Dr. King's dream.
And history replays itself, because in a sense, you're calling for a third Reconstruction. And the first Reconstruction, right after the Civil Rights Movement, a time where there was some legislation in place to give financial literacy and financial rights to Black people, that eventually was turned over after Lincoln was assassinated. Then the second Reconstruction, which is just what you're talking about right now, is Martin Luther King and Andrew Young and the move towards financial literacy, which I think unfortunately was clipped a little short.
A little.
Yeah, you're now talking about the third Reconstruction. What is the third Reconstruction? What should we be aiming for right now?
It's a movement from the streets, protesting, anger, using your hands and your feet, physical change. By the way, by poor Blacks, and now we're seeing today poor whites who are riding at the ballot box and marching in the streets, frustrated because they don't have a business plan for their life. That's why they're frustrated. They want to blame it on somebody else, but in reality, we've abandoned them. America abandoned them after the Industrial Revolution and gave them no skill set so they can keep their pickup truck and their fishing boat and their vacation once a year and a middle-class lifestyle with a high school education. We did not come to them. We left them sitting at the curb, and they're upset about it. They've got a reason to be upset about it. And what we need to now do is to go from the streets with protesting to the business suites and partnering and prospering. So it's an opportunity-led movement. It's opportunity for all. It's prosperity for all. If you can go get it, you got to go get it, but the door should be open. And it's green rooms for internships, apprenticeships, access to capital, access to credit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not just making money, but building wealth. And you can't do that unless you understand how money, free enterprise, capitalism, economics, and opportunity works, which is financial literacy for all. It's a starting point. This is like going to Japan and making sure you can speak a little Japanese. It's like going to Germany and speaking a little German. You got to speak the language in order to get around. We live in a free enterprise democracy here and around the world. And you got to speak the language to get around so that you can use the system and it's not using you. And we can go on with the whole abuse part of capitalism has been sort of phase one. It's called bad. I could do a whole book called Bad Capitalism.
Broken capitalism. Yeah.
No, I'd call it bad capitalism. It starts with slavery. So good capitalism is where I benefit, Jordan, and you benefit more. So I loaned you money for a house. You bought a house, and that house appreciated in value. Fair exchange is no robbery. You now are a homeowner. You bought the home for $100,000. You paid my mortgage off in over 30 years, but that home is worth in 10 years. That home is worth 400,000. Everybody won. But bad capitalism is where I benefit and you pay a price for it. I enslaved you. You couldn't, you couldn't be an asset. You couldn't get an asset because you were an asset. I bought you, sold you, traded you, repressed you, distressed you, sold your family off. I made it illegal for you to educate yourself, and then I set you free into a lynching noose and a Klan rally every night in your front doorstep, and told you need to bootstrap yourself. You had no shoelaces, you had no education, and I gave you 40 acres and a mule. I took that back a year after Lincoln was assassinated. That was only 18,000 plots of land, or 40 acres, by the way, in North Carolina. And everybody else got the Homestead Act, which was 270 million acres, 10% of all American land, and that was 660 acres per plot. And that's 100 million Americans today, which are 99.8% white. So you want to know why is a black white net worth 10 times the amount of a black net worth? Well, you don't have to be a genius to figure out. Somebody got the land and somebody else didn't, as a starting point, because the biggest business in the world is real estate. And I can go on and on and on. You have access to capital, redlining. That wasn't banks. That was the government. That was a U.S. federal government that put a red line around black neighborhoods and said they were dangerous, that they would not insure a mortgage. That's exactly where you should have insured the mortgage. So where do you think a bank with common sense, Jordan? Look, you can be a saint. You can go to church every Sunday, but you have a choice between, I'm going to go to where angels fear to tread, where there's no insurance for mortgages, and make a loan there. The government's already said it's dangerous. Or I can go over here to this white suburb that they just built, and it looks like it's stable. People have jobs, and I can go, and the government will guarantee my mortgage over here. Well, I'm going to go to the latter. And by the way, that's where the value is going to increase. And so you can have, right now, you have homes 15 minutes apart. One home's worth 50,000, another home's worth 800,000, 15 minutes apart. And all this stuff has legs to it. All this stuff, and again, nothing of what I'm saying is all in the book. None of it's an opinion or some political diatribe. This is just simple math, man. I mean, 2 + 2 = 4. I mean, it's Stevie Wonder can see this. It's so simple. No one's ever, I don't think anybody's ever tried to put together the social justice matrix using a calculator. That's all I've done.
Well, John, I want to thank you for coming on the show. To paraphrase you, and hopefully I don't get this too wrong, it's not a black issue. It's not a white issue. It's not a yellow, green, or blue issue. It's not a rainbow issue. It's a green issue, the color of the American currency. If you're interested in learning more about the third Reconstruction and America's new business plan, America's new dream, check out Financial Literacy for All, Disrupting Struggle, Advancing Financial Freedom, and Building a New American Middle Class. John Hope Bryant, thank you so much for coming on Earn and Invest today.
Well, thank you for making it interesting. You taught me a few things.
That's a wrap. All right, I leave things running just to catch anything we talk about afterwards. I know you've got to go, but thank you so much for doing this. Wonderful book. I really, really enjoyed it, and I hope all my audience enjoys it too.
Well, thank you so much, Jordan. I really enjoyed it. And you got me thinking about, it never hit me that my brother was the first person to go to college for that $4,000 investment for my dad. My mother, I mean, that was a sort of an add-on effect of how important that decision was. I don't know why it never hit me until now, but it just triggered, like, wow. That's why my mother thought, she said, this is not going to happen to my other kids. I'm out.
I live now and grew up in Evanston, Illinois, which is a very different place for a few reasons. One is, when I was born and my brothers were older, they rewrote the school districts such that they had a much more equal grouping of black, white, Mexican, et cetera. They tried to really equalize the school system. And I happen to live in the area in West Evanston that had almost no black people. And so they decided to bus students into our school. So my mom has these very vivid memories of walking the kids and seeing this attempt to really try to integrate the school system so that it was natural and most people could just walk to their schools. The other thing, as you might know, is Evanston was one of the first places to have reparations. So it's been a real interesting place to kind of grow up and just see things as they are, maybe how they should be, how they could get better. Not perfect by any means. We've got a lot of problems in Evanston, but it's a start.
Yeah, it is, yeah, and it's inspiring that the people want to do the right thing in Evanston. I think that unless you're connected, by the way, with financial literacy, as to come bring this full circle, uh, you'll find that people will probably squander whatever resources they get because they just don't know any better. Isn't, you know, I can give a homeless guy $1 million, who'll be broke in 6 months
Yep.
if nothing changes in his mind or in his heart or his soul or his know-how. He just doesn't know any better. You win the lottery, you'll be broken 5 years. So, you know, it's a right thing to do. But if America paid reparations to everybody, we go broke. It's in the trillions. So I'm not quite sure sort of where the story ends or how. We're going to probably do something else like education for all, or, you know,
Yeah.
if we ever get
It's got to be
right
tied to
now,
the know-how. Yeah.
yeah, right now we're heading in the exact opposite direction. So it's not even a con. I'm just trying to save what used to be called DE&I, for God's sakes. But
Mhm.
I do think we need more elegant, sophisticated conversation about how we repair the breach whenever we're prepared to have that conversation. We're not prepared to have it as a country yet, but I applaud the people there
Yeah.
for trying to do the right thing.
I guess part of it is how many people believe there is a breach to start with, because a lot of people
Well, there
don't
you go.
even, a lot of people, unfortunately, feel like that was something of the past and not really part of their, you know, they feel like I was born in the last 30 or 40 years. What does that have to do with me? And that's hard, right?
That's why I try in this book to, again, just step people through. It's sort of it's a financial literacy book, but it's sort of an underground history book. So trying to walk people through these big benchmarks. And that's why I talk about the woman thing as an example. That was, you know, that was right around the corner. Anyway, so nice to talk to you, Jordan. You obviously care a great deal, and you're fully invested in everything you do. Every episode you do your research. I really appreciate that.
It was a pleasure reading your book. I will let your people know when this comes out.
Done, and we'll share it.
Take care of yourself.
God
Thank you
bless.
again for doing this.
My pleasure. Peace and light.
Take care.